The courtroom gasped when Rachel slammed a brown envelope onto the judge's bench so hard the microphone squealed. Her husband's mistress stopped laughing mid-sentence. Her diamond necklace suddenly felt like a noose. Everyone expected a broken waitress begging for scraps. They didn't expect her to smile. They didn't expect the judge's face to drain of color as he read the first page. They didn't expect him to whisper, "Dear God." The secret inside wouldn't just end a marriage. It would bury an empire. And the man who built it. He was about to learn his wife had been playing a different game entirely. Comment below what city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story travels. Rachel Chen had exactly $47 in her checking account when she walked into the Manhattan Superior Court. She knew because she had checked it 3 times on the bus ride over. Once when Emma started crying because her shoes were too tight. Once when Noah asked why they couldn't take a taxi like Daddy. And once more when she caught her reflection in the window and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. $47. That was what 5 years of marriage to Marcus Wells had left her. The twins held her hands as they pushed through the heavy oak doors. Emma on the left, Noah on the right. They were 3 years old, dressed in matching outfits she had found at Goodwill last week. The price tags had said $8 each. She had talked the cashier down to $12 for both. The courtroom was already packed. Rachel spotted Marcus immediately. He sat at the front table adjusting the cuffs of his Italian suit. The Rolex on his wrist caught the light. She had given him that watch for their first anniversary back when she still believed in anniversaries. And there, sitting next to him, was Victoria Palmer. Victoria wore white. Of course she did. A pristine pencil skirt and blazer that probably cost more than Rachel's rent. Her blonde hair fell in perfect waves. Her legs were crossed at the ankle, revealing red-soled heels that Rachel recognized. They were her heels. From her closet. The ones Marcus had bought her for their honeymoon in Paris. "Mommy," Noah whispered, tugging at her cardigan. "That lady is wearing your shoes." Rachel squeezed his hand. "I know, baby." "Is she going to give them back?" "No," Rachel said quietly. "She's not." The gallery noticed her before Marcus did. Heads turned. Whispers started. Rachel knew what they saw. A woman in a faded floral dress 2 sizes too big. Dark circles under her eyes that no concealer could hide. Hair that hadn't seen a salon in 6 months. They saw a loser. A cast-off. The starter wife being traded in for the upgrade. Let them look, Rachel thought. Let them all look. Is she seriously bringing children into a courtroom? Victoria's voice carried across the room. She made no effort to whisper. God, Marcus, she really has no class. Marcus turned. His eyes swept over Rachel with a look she had come to know well. Disappointment mixed with disgust. Sarah, he said deliberately, using the wrong name. He had been calling her Sarah for months, even though he knew she hated it. You're late. My name is Rachel. Whatever. Marcus waved his hand dismissively. Just sit down. Let's get this over with. Rachel walked down the center aisle. The twins trotted beside her, their small shoes clicking against the floor. Emma buried her face in Rachel's skirt. Noah stared at the judge's bench with wide, curious eyes. Arthur Pendleton, Marcus's lawyer, was already on his feet. He was a small man with cold eyes and a reputation for destroying ex-wives. Your Honor, Pendleton announced loud enough for the reporters to hear, the respondent has arrived without legal counsel. Given her history of instability and her clear disregard for these proceedings, we move to expedite the default judgment. Judge Harrison Morrison looked up from his papers. He was an older man pushing 70 with steel gray hair and the weathered face of someone who had heard every lie humanity could tell. Mrs. Wells, the judge said. Where is your attorney? Rachel settled the twins onto the bench behind her. She handed them a tablet, whispered something in their ears, and turned to face the judge. I don't have one, Your Honor. You don't have one? Morrison's eyebrows rose. Ma'am, this is a complex divorce proceeding involving significant assets. You understand you have the right to legal representation. I understand. Rachel kept her voice steady. But my husband froze our joint accounts 3 weeks ago. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Pendleton cut in smoothly. Your Honor, Mr. Wells secured the marital assets to prevent dissipation. We offered Mrs. Wells a generous stipend of $500 per week, which she refused. $500, Rachel repeated. She turned to look at Pendleton. To feed 2 children and pay rent in Manhattan. After your client kicked us out of our home. You left voluntarily. I left because he moved her in. Rachel pointed at Victoria. I came home from grocery shopping and found her bags in my hallway and her drinking tea in my kitchen, in my robe. Victoria rolled her eyes. Drama queen. Order. Judge Morrison's voice cut through the murmurs. Ms. Palmer, you are a spectator in these proceedings. One more outburst, and I will have you removed. Victoria shrank back, muttering something under her breath. Marcus placed a calming hand on her knee. Rachel saw the gesture. She noted it. She filed it away. Mr. Pendleton, the judge continued, present your case. Pendleton stood buttoning his jacket with practiced precision. Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter. 5 years ago, Mr. Wells and Mrs. Wells signed a prenuptial agreement. In the event of divorce, Mrs. Wells receives a flat settlement of $50,000 and waives all rights to spousal support and any claim to Wells Digital. He paused for effect. Furthermore, we are petitioning for full custody of the minor children Emma and Noah Wells. Mrs. Wells is currently living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Queens. She has no stable income. She has no family support. She is emotionally and financially unfit to raise children of such stature. Rachel listened without interrupting. She had heard these arguments before in phone calls from Pendleton's office, in Marcus's texts, in the pitying looks from her neighbors. Pendleton continued pacing the floor like a shark circling blood. Mrs. Wells has no college degree. Before her marriage, she worked as a waitress at a diner. A diner, Your Honor. She has no skills applicable to the corporate world, no understanding of the environment in which these children will eventually operate. Mr. Wells, on the other hand, can provide the best schools, the best nannies, the best opportunities. He turned to look at Rachel with something close to sympathy. We are not trying to be cruel, Your Honor. We simply want what's best for the children. And what's best is stability, resources, a future. Pendleton sat down. The silence stretched. Judge Morrison looked at Rachel. Mrs. Wells, you've heard the petition. You signed the prenup. Is there any reason this court should not enforce it? Rachel took a deep breath. This was it. 5 years of planning. 5 years of waiting. 5 years of watching and documenting and preparing for this exact moment. She reached into her canvas tote bag. Her hands trembled slightly, but she steadied them. She pulled out a thick brown envelope sealed with red tape. I signed the prenup, Your Honor, Rachel said, because I loved him. I didn't care about the money. I thought we were building something together. She looked at Marcus. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt. No, it was pity. He pitied her. But Marcus seems to have forgotten something, Rachel continued. There's a clause in the addendum, Section 7, Paragraph 3. It concerns the origin of intellectual property. Marcus frowned. Origin of what? He also seems to have forgotten who I was, Rachel said, placing the envelope on the judge's bench, before I was a waitress. Victoria laughed. Who you were, honey. You were a nobody. You were scrubbing tables when Marcus found you. You should be thanking him for the 5 years of luxury he gave you. Rachel turned to face Victoria, and for the first time she smiled. It was not a kind smile. I was hiding, Victoria, Rachel said softly. I was taking a break from a life that you spend every waking moment trying to fake. Judge Morrison opened the envelope. He pulled out a stack of documents. He read the first page. His eyebrows rose. He flipped to the second page. His jaw tightened. He looked at Rachel, then at Marcus, then back at the documents. Mr. Pendleton, the judge said, his voice strangely tight. Did you review the entirety of the marriage contract before filing this petition? Pendleton blinked. Your Honor, Mr. Wells drafted the initial terms himself before engaging my firm. I assumed the appendices were standard boilerplate. You assumed. Morrison's tone could have frozen water. So you did not read Appendix C. No, Your Honor. The judge turned to Marcus. Mr. Wells, these patent numbers, the original code that powers Wells Digital. Do you know whose name is on the registration? Marcus scoffed. Mine, obviously. I wrote that code. No. Rachel's voice cuts across the room like a blade. You wrote the interface, Marcus, the pretty buttons, the user experience. But the core, the deep learning algorithm that makes your entire company work, that was written by R.C. R.C. Marcus rolled his eyes. Rachel Chen, your maiden name. I put your initials on it as a romantic gesture. It means nothing. It means everything, Judge Morrison said. The courtroom went silent. Morrison held up one of the documents. According to this deed of trust, Rachel Chen is not just a name. It's a registered alias for Rachel Kingston. He paused, letting the name settle over the room like a bomb. Rachel Kingston, the judge repeated. Daughter of Henry Kingston. The blood drained from Marcus's face. Henry Kingston. The name was legend in the tech world. He had built half of Silicon Valley's infrastructure before disappearing from public life in 2010. His fortune was estimated at somewhere between $30 and $50 billion. No one knew for sure because no one could track it all. Ms. Kingston, Judge Morrison said, looking at Rachel with something approaching respect. Is this accurate? Rachel nodded. It is, Your Honor. This is insane, Marcus sputtered. He stood up, knocking his chair back. She's lying. She's a waitress from Ohio. I've seen the photos. I've met her. Well, I never met her parents because she said they were dead. But this is clearly a forgery. Pendleton, tell him. Tell him this is fraud. But Pendleton wasn't looking at Marcus. He was leaning over the judge's bench, staring at the documents. His face had gone gray. Julian, Pendleton whispered, these have the seal of the Sovereign Trust of Geneva, and the signature of a senior partner at Sullivan and Cromwell. So she paid for good forgeries, Marcus insisted. That doesn't make them real. Mr. Wells, Judge Morrison's voice was sharp. I have been a judge in this court for 31 years. I know what a genuine sovereign trust seal looks like. I have seen exactly 3 in my career. This is not a forgery. Victoria stood up. Her face had gone pale. Wait. What does this mean, Marcus? What is happening? Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at Rachel like he had never seen her before. Because he hadn't. Not really. Rachel, he said slowly. All this time you were a Kingston? Yes. But why? Why would you hide that? Why would you work in a diner? Why would you live in that tiny apartment? Rachel looked at him. For a moment the mask slipped and he saw something raw beneath it. Pain, betrayal, and underneath all of it, a cold, burning anger. Because I wanted to see if anyone could love me, Rachel said quietly. Not my father's money, not the Kingston name, just me. She took a step closer to him. I met you at that diner, Marcus. You were charming. You were passionate. You talked about changing the world with technology. I believed you. And late at night while you were sleeping, I would stay up fixing your code. I wrote the algorithms that made your company work. I gave you everything. Her voice hardened. All I wanted was a husband who loved me. Not what I could give him. Just me. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I did love you, he said finally. But you changed. You got pregnant. You stopped trying. You stopped coming to events. You stopped being fun. I stopped coming to events because I finally saw them for what they were, Rachel replied. Marketplaces. You were selling yourself to investors, and I was just set dressing. The sweet little waitress who made you look humble. That's not fair. No, Marcus. What wasn't fair was coming home to find your mistress wearing my robe. What wasn't fair was you freezing my accounts so I couldn't afford diapers. What wasn't fair was you trying to take my children because you think a mother who clipped coupons isn't good enough for Wells royalty." She turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Appendix C, Section 2, the Intellectual Property Clause." Morrison nodded, flipping through the documents. "I see it. According to that clause, any intellectual property brought into the marriage by either party remains the sole property of the originator. The Wells digital algorithm was created by me using techniques and frameworks I developed before our marriage. Marcus signed an assignment deed transferring all rights to the Aurora Trust, which I control." "I never signed anything like that," Marcus protested. "Yes, you did." Rachel pulled out another document. 3 years ago, I told you it was a standard liability waiver for the company insurance. You didn't read it. You never read anything you consider beneath you." Marcus grabbed the paper. His eyes scanned it frantically. His signature was at the bottom, clear as day. This isn't possible." "There's more," Rachel said. "Your Honor, please turn to the next page. You'll find a detailed accounting of company funds that were redirected over the past 18 months, specifically funds that were transferred to personal accounts, real estate purchases, and jewelry." Victoria's hand flew to her throat, to the diamond necklace she was wearing. "The penthouse in Tribeca," Rachel continued. "The one where Ms. Palmer currently lives. It was purchased with company money. The Cartier necklace she's wearing, company money. The Mercedes in the garage, company money." She looked at Victoria. "You're wearing $3 million worth of my children's inheritance, Victoria. I hope it was worth it." Victoria's face contorted. "You can't prove any of that." "Actually, I can. I had a forensic accountant trace every wire transfer for the past 2 years. The documentation is in Appendix D." Pendleton was already gathering his papers. His hands were shaking. "Mr. Pendleton." Marcus turned to his lawyer. "Do something. Say something." "I'm recusing myself," Pendleton said, not meeting Marcus's eyes. "I represent Marcus Wells, owner of Wells Digital. Since that person apparently doesn't exist, and since my retainer was paid from an account that is now frozen by the actual owner, I am currently working pro bono. And I don't work pro bono. You can't just leave. I suggest you request a public defender, Mr. Wells, because once Ms. Kingston files criminal charges, this divorce will be the least of your problems." Pendleton walked out. The heavy doors closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid dropping. Marcus stood alone. His mistress was slowly edging away from him. His lawyer was gone. His empire was crumbling. He looked at Rachel, and for the first time he saw her. Really saw her. Not the tired housewife in the faded dress, not the waitress he had plucked from obscurity, but the woman who had been playing chess while he was playing checkers. "You planned this," Marcus whispered. "From the beginning. You planned all of this." Rachel didn't deny it. "I gave you 5 years, Marcus. 5 years to prove you were different. 5 years to choose me over the money, over the status, over the mistresses. You failed every single test." She picked up her canvas bag. "And now? Now you're going to learn what happens when you underestimate a waitress." Judge Morrison cleared his throat. "Ms. Kingston, given the complexity of these revelations, I'm ordering a continuance. We will reconvene in 72 hours to properly review all documentation. In the meantime, all assets related to Wells Digital are frozen pending investigation." He looked at Marcus. "Mr. Wells, I strongly suggest you find new legal representation, and I would advise you not to leave the jurisdiction." The gavel came down. Marcus didn't move. He stood frozen at the table, staring at the documents in his hands, trying to make sense of the wreckage of his life. Victoria grabbed her purse and headed for the door without a backward glance. Rachel gathered the twins. Emma was rubbing her eyes sleepily. Noah looked up at his mother. "Did we win, Mommy?" Rachel smiled, a real smile this time, tired but genuine. "Not yet, sweetheart, but we're winning." She walked out of the courtroom holding her children's hands. The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted questions. She ignored them all. Behind her, Marcus finally moved. He sank into his chair. buried his head in his hands, and tried to remember how a woman he had dismissed as a waitress had just destroyed everything he had built. He wouldn't figure it out. Not today. Not ever. Because Marcus Wells had made the oldest mistake in the book. He had underestimated his wife. And Rachel Kingston was just getting started. 72 hours felt like an eternity when your entire life was collapsing. Marcus Wells hadn't slept since the hearing. He sat in the penthouse that apparently didn't belong to him, drinking whiskey that he could no longer afford, staring at the Manhattan skyline through windows that would soon have someone else's name on the deed. His phone had been ringing non-stop. Board members, investors, reporters. He had stopped answering after the first 100 calls. Victoria had locked herself in the bedroom. He could hear her in there sobbing and screaming into her phone at someone named Bradley, who was apparently her backup plan. Of course she had a backup plan. Women like Victoria always did. The doorbell rang. Marcus didn't move. It rang again. Then again. Then someone started pounding. "Mr. Wells," a muffled voice came through the door. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Open the door or we will enter by force." Marcus set down his whiskey glass. His hand was shaking so badly that the ice cubes rattled. He walked to the door and opened it. 2 agents stood in the hallway. A man and a woman, both in dark suits, both with expressions that suggested they had seen every kind of criminal and found them all equally boring. "Marcus Wells?" the woman asked. "Yes." "I'm Special Agent Torres. This is Special Agent Chen. We have a warrant for your arrest." Marcus blinked. "Arrest for what?" "Wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage." Corporate espionage. Marcus actually laughed. It came out high and strange. "I didn't commit espionage. I own the company." "According to our investigation, Mr. Wells, you don't own anything." Agent Torres held up a document. "You're listed as an employee of Wells Digital, which is a subsidiary of the Aurora Trust. The actual owner has filed charges." "Rachel." Marcus said her name like a curse. "She's doing this. She's framing me." "Sir, we have evidence of wire transfers to foreign accounts. We have emails discussing the sale of proprietary algorithms to overseas competitors. We have 18 months of documented financial misconduct." "I never sent any emails about selling algorithms." Agent Chen tilted his head. "No." "What about Ms. Palmer?" Marcus felt the floor tilt beneath him. "Victoria." "Victoria!" Marcus spun around and stormed toward the bedroom. He threw open the door. Victoria was standing by the window, fully dressed, her Louis Vuitton suitcase open on the bed. She was in the middle of stuffing jewelry into a smaller bag. "What did you do?" Marcus grabbed her arm. "What emails did you send?" Victoria tried to pull away. "Let go of me. Tell me what you did." "I did what you told me to do," Victoria screamed back. "You said we needed cash for the wedding. You said the prenup was ironclad and we'd have all her money soon. You told me to reach out to those investors in Shanghai. I said find investors. I didn't say sell them the source code. You said do whatever it takes. I didn't mean commit a federal crime." Agent Torres appeared in the doorway. "Victoria Palmer, you're also under arrest for conspiracy to commit corporate espionage and wire fraud." Victoria's face went white. No, no. I'm not going to prison. This was all him." She pointed at Marcus. "He made me do everything. I'm a victim here. I didn't know what was in those files. He told me they were just marketing materials." Marcus stared at her. "You're throwing me under the bus after everything I gave you." "Everything you gave me." Victoria laughed bitterly. "You gave me stolen goods, Marcus. Every piece of jewelry, every designer bag, every vacation. All bought with money that wasn't yours. You made me an accomplice without telling me. I didn't know it wasn't my money. Neither did I, so I guess we're both idiots, aren't we?" Agent Chen stepped forward with handcuffs. "You can continue this conversation at the field office." Turn around, both of you." Marcus felt the cold metal close around his wrists. It was surreal. 24 hours ago, he had been planning his victory celebration. Now he was being led out of his own apartment in handcuffs, while his mistress blamed him for her crimes. As they walked through the lobby, Marcus saw the paparazzi gathered outside. Cameras flashed. Questions were shouted. Someone threw coffee at him. He kept his head down and tried to remember when exactly his life had gone so wrong. The answer, he realized, was 5 years ago. The day he met a waitress named Rachel and decided she would be easy to control. Meanwhile, across town, Rachel was sitting in a lawyer's office that looked nothing like Arthur Pendleton's mahogany and leather domain. This office was bright, modern, and staffed by a team of young attorneys who worked exclusively for the Kingston Family Trust. "The FBI made the arrests this morning," said Margaret Chen, the lead attorney. "No relation to the agent despite the shared name. Marcus Wells and Victoria Palmer are both in custody." Rachel nodded slowly. She had expected this, but hearing it still felt strange. "What are the charges?" "Wire fraud, embezzlement, and corporate espionage. The espionage charge is the serious one. They were trying to sell the core algorithm to a tech consortium in Shanghai. If convicted, they're looking at 15 to 20 years each." Rachel looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly. "I didn't want it to go this far," she said quietly. Margaret leaned forward. "Mrs. Kingston, with all due respect, they did this to themselves. You gave your husband access to a multi-billion-dollar technology. He chose to steal from it and sell it to foreign competitors. That's not on you." "I know. I just—" Rachel paused. "The children. What do I tell them about their father?" "You tell them the truth. Age-appropriate, of course. But children are resilient. They'll understand more than you think." Rachel thought about Emma and Noah currently being watched by a nanny at their new apartment. A real apartment this time, not the cramped one-bedroom in Queens. The Kingston Trust had arranged for a penthouse on the Upper East Side with round-the-clock security. For the first time in 5 years, Rachel could afford to keep her children safe. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like exhaustion. "There's something else," Margaret said, her tone shifting. "Something we need to discuss." Rachel looked up. "What?" "Your father called." The words hung in the air like a threat. "My father," Rachel repeated slowly. "My father, who has been in a medical coma in Switzerland for the past 3 years. Apparently, he's made a remarkable recovery." Rachel felt her stomach drop. "That's not possible. I saw the medical reports. Massive stroke, vegetative state, no chance of recovery." Margaret's expression was carefully neutral. "It seems those reports may have been optimistic about his condition, or pessimistic, depending on your perspective." "You're saying he faked it?" "I'm saying that Henry Kingston wants to meet his grandchildren, and he's asking that you bring them to the family estate in the Hamptons this weekend." Rachel stood up so abruptly that her chair scraped against the floor. "No, Mrs. Kingston, no. I am not taking my children anywhere near that man. I left that world for a reason. I changed my name for a reason. I spent 10 years building a life away from him, and I am not going back." Margaret sighed. "I understand your concerns, but Henry Kingston is still the primary trustee of the family estate. If he wants to see you, he has considerable resources to make that happen. It might be better to meet him on your terms rather than his." "There are no good terms when it comes to my father." Rachel walked to the window. The city stretched out below her, millions of people going about their lives unaware of the chess game being played in boardrooms and courtrooms above them. Her father was awake. The thought made her feel like a child again, small and powerless and watched. "What does he want?" Rachel asked without turning around. "He didn't say, but I imagine it has something to do with the twins, and with the fact that you just made international news as the Kingston heiress who destroyed her husband in open court." "I didn't do it for attention." "I know, but attention is what you got, and your father is not the kind of man who lets family business become public spectacle without having opinions about it." Rachel closed her eyes. She had known this moment would come eventually. She had just hoped for more time, more distance. A few more years of peace before the past caught up with her. But the past always caught up. That was the thing about running. You could change your name, change your city, change your entire life. But the blood in your veins stayed the same. Fine, Rachel said finally. Set up a meeting, but not at the estate. Somewhere public, somewhere neutral. I'll make the arrangements. Rachel gathered her bag and headed for the door. Then she paused. Margaret, one more thing. Yes. If my father tries anything, if he makes any move toward custody of my children, I want you to bury him. I don't care what it costs. I don't care what it takes. He doesn't get to touch them. Margaret nodded. Understood. Rachel walked out of the office and into an elevator lined with mirrors. She looked at her reflection at the tired woman in the designer clothes that still felt like a costume. She had won the battle against Marcus, but the war was just beginning, and her father was a much more dangerous opponent. The Nassau County Correctional Center smelled like bleach and despair. Marcus sat in the visitation room wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his complexion, waiting for someone who probably wasn't coming. He had called his mother. She had said she needed time to process. He had called his brother. His brother had laughed and hung up. He had called every friend he could think of, every business associate, every golfing buddy who had slapped his back and told him he was going places. None of them answered. The door opened. A guard walked in, followed by a woman Marcus didn't recognize. She was middle-aged, wearing a sensible pantsuit, carrying a leather briefcase. Mr. Wells, I'm Diana Hartley. I'm a public defender assigned to your case. Marcus stared at her. A public defender. I'm facing 20 years for espionage and they gave me a public defender. Diana sat down across from him unfazed. Your assets have been frozen, Mr. Wells. Your previous attorney has declined to continue representation, and given the charges against you, most private firms are unwilling to take the case. Because of Rachel, she's blacklisting me. Because of the evidence, Mr. Wells, the prosecution has emails, wire transfers, and recorded phone conversations. They have testimony from Victoria Palmer, who has agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. Marcus's head snapped up. Victoria is testifying against me. She's telling them everything, the affair, the financial arrangements, the sale of the algorithm. According to her statement, you masterminded the entire operation and she was merely following orders. That's a lie. She was in on everything. She picked out the buyers in Shanghai. She negotiated the price. Do you have proof of that? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it. He didn't have proof. He had trusted Victoria. He had let her handle the details because he was too busy running the company to micromanage. The company that wasn't even his. This is insane, Marcus said, running his hands through his hair. It was greasy and unwashed. He couldn't remember the last time he had showered. I built Wells Digital from nothing. I worked 18-hour days for years. I sacrificed everything. And now my wife, my ex-wife, whatever she is, she's taking it all because of some legal technicality. Diana's expression didn't change. Mr. Wells. According to the documentation provided to the court, you didn't build Wells Digital. You built a shell around technology that was created by someone else. The core algorithm, the thing that actually makes your company valuable, was developed by Rachel Kingston before your marriage. She was a waitress. She was a billionaire's daughter who happened to be working as a waitress. Apparently, she was quite good at both. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. The guard by the door took a step forward. Diana held up a hand to stop him. Mr. Wells, I'm going to give you some advice. Free of charge, since that's all you can afford. Stop thinking about what you lost. Start thinking about how to minimize what you're going to lose next. What does that mean? It means the prosecution has offered a deal. Plead guilty to wire fraud and embezzlement, testify against any additional conspirators, and they'll drop the espionage charge. You're looking at 7 to 10 years instead of 20. Marcus laughed bitterly. 7 to 10 years. I'm supposed to be grateful for that. You're supposed to be realistic. The alternative is going to trial where a jury will hear about how you cheated on your wife, stole from your company, and tried to sell American technology to foreign interests. In the current political climate, that's not a sympathetic look. I didn't know it was her technology. I thought I owned it. Ignorance isn't a defense, Mr. Wells. You signed documents you didn't read. You trusted a woman you were betraying. You made choices, and now you're facing consequences. Diana stood up, gathering her briefcase. Think about the deal. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, they're taking it off the table. She walked toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Mr. Wells. Your children. Marcus looked up sharply. Emma and Noah. What about them? Mrs. Kingston's attorneys have filed for full custody. Given your current legal situation, it's likely to be granted. You should prepare yourself for the possibility that you won't see them for a very long time. She left. Marcus sat alone in the visitation room, surrounded by empty chairs and fluorescent lights. He thought about his children, about Emma's laugh and Noah's curiosity, and the way they used to run to him when he came home from work. He tried to remember the last time he had actually played with them, the last time he had read them a bedtime story or taken them to the park. He couldn't remember. He had been too busy, too focused on the company, on the investors, on Victoria, on all the things that seemed so important and now meant nothing. Rachel had been right about one thing. He hadn't seen them as children. He had seen them as obligations, as complications in his carefully planned life, and now they were gone along with everything else. Marcus put his head in his hands and cried. It was the first time he had cried since he was 12 years old, when his father had told him that tears were for losers. Maybe his father had been right, because right now Marcus Wells felt like the biggest loser in the world. The Carlisle Hotel had a private dining room on the 3rd floor that was reserved for guests who valued discretion above all else. Rachel had chosen it specifically because it was the kind of place where people minded their own business. She arrived early, dressed in a navy blue dress that was elegant but not ostentatious. She wanted to look like herself, not the waitress, not the billionaire heiress, just Rachel. The twins were at home with the nanny and 2 security guards. Rachel had kissed them goodbye 3 times before leaving, making them promise to eat their vegetables and go to bed on time. Emma had asked where Mommy was going. Rachel had said she was meeting an old friend. It wasn't exactly a lie. Henry Kingston had been many things to her over the years. A father, a teacher, a tyrant, a ghost. She supposed friend was as good a word as any. The door to the private dining room opened. A man walked in. Rachel hadn't seen her father in person for almost 10 years. The last time had been at a family estate in the Netherlands, when she had told him she was leaving the company, leaving the name, leaving everything. He had called her a disappointment. She had called him a monster. Neither of them had been entirely wrong. Henry Kingston was 73 years old now, but he moved like a man half his age. He was thin, almost gaunt, with silver hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. His eyes were pale blue and utterly cold. He was wearing a simple gray suit. No jewelry. No watch. Henry Kingston didn't need accessories to signal his power. Serafina, he said. Don't call me that. It's your name. My name is Rachel. It has been for 10 years. Henry smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Very well. Rachel, may I sit? Rachel gestured to the chair across from her. Henry sat down, folding his hands on the table. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. You look well, Henry said finally. Tired but well. Motherhood suits you. I didn't come here for small talk. No, I imagine you didn't. Henry leaned back slightly. You came because you're afraid of me. You want to know what I want. You want to assess the threat level before deciding how to respond. Rachel's jaw tightened. I'm not afraid of you. Yes, you are. You should be. I taught you to be. Fear is a useful tool, Rachel. It keeps us sharp. It keeps us alive. It also keeps us alone. Henry acknowledged this with a slight tilt of his head. Perhaps. But I didn't build an empire by collecting friends. I built it by eliminating threats, Speaking of which, your husband. Ex-husband. Yes. I read about the hearing. Quite the performance. You destroyed him publicly, systematically, completely. Very impressive. Rachel felt her stomach turn. She didn't want her father's approval. It felt like a stain. I did what I had to do to protect my children. You did what a Kingston does, Henry corrected. You identified a threat. You gathered intelligence. You waited for the optimal moment. And then you struck with overwhelming force. That's not maternal instinct. That's strategy. What do you want, father? Henry's smile faded. He looked at her with something that might have been sadness if he were capable of such an emotion. I'm dying, Rachel. The words hung in the air. Rachel had prepared herself for manipulation, for threats, for some elaborate scheme to take control of her life and her children. She had not prepared for this. Dying, she repeated flatly. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. Henry's voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing quarterly earnings. The coma story was a cover while I pursued experimental treatments. None of them worked. I'm sorry, Rachel said. She wasn't sure if she meant it. Don't be. I've lived 73 years and built more than most men could dream of. I have no complaints. He paused. But I do have regrets. Regrets? You for one. The way I raised you. The way I treated your mother. The way I drove you away. Rachel stared at him. In 73 years, she had never heard her father admit to a mistake. Not once. Are you dying, or are you having a stroke because you don't sound like yourself? Henry actually laughed. It was a dry, rattling sound. Mortality has a way of clarifying things. I have 6 months to put my affairs in order. And the most important affair is the succession of the Kingston Empire. I don't want it. I know you don't. You made that clear when you left. But what about Emma and Noah? Rachel's hands curled into fists under the table. My children are not part of this negotiation. Everything is part of every negotiation. That's the first thing I taught you. Henry leaned forward. Those twins are my only grandchildren. They're Kingstons whether you like it or not. And when I die, they will inherit one of the largest private fortunes on earth. I'll refuse it on their behalf. You can't. The trust is irrevocable. I designed it that way specifically to prevent what you're trying to do. Henry's eyes glittered. I knew you might run. I knew you might hate me. So I made sure that no matter what happened, the Kingston line would continue. Rachel felt the trap closing around her. It was always like this with her father. He was always 10 moves ahead. What do you want? She asked again. I want to meet them, my grandchildren. I want to see them before I die, and I want to discuss their future, their education, their preparation for the responsibilities they'll inherit. They're 3 years old. So were you when I started teaching you chess. You beat your first grandmaster when you were 7. And I hated every moment of it. You excelled at every moment of it. Hate and excellence are not mutually exclusive. Henry reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it across the table. This is my proposal. Read it, consider it, and then give me your answer. Rachel didn't touch the envelope. And if my answer is no, Henry's expression didn't change. Then I'll respect your wishes. I'll die without meeting my grandchildren. And they'll inherit everything when they turn 18, completely unprepared for the responsibility surrounded by people who will try to exploit them. He stood up. I'm not threatening you, Rachel. I'm telling you the truth. The Kingston fortune is a burden as much as a blessing. I had hoped to prepare you to carry it. You refused. Now the burden falls to Emma and Noah. The question is whether they'll face it alone or with family support. He walked toward the door. 1 week, Rachel. Give me your answer in 1 week. He left. Rachel sat alone at the table, staring at the envelope. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. Every instinct screamed at her to burn the envelope and run. But she couldn't run anymore. She had children now. She had responsibilities. And her father, for all his faults, was right about one thing. The Kingston fortune would find Emma and Noah whether she wanted it to or not. The only question was whether they would be ready for it. Rachel picked up the envelope. She turned it over in her hands. Then she opened it and began to read. The proposal was 10 pages long. It outlined a structured education plan for the twins, including private tutors, language instruction, financial literacy training, and what Henry called strategic thinking development. It proposed regular visits to the family estate. It suggested summer programs at Kingston-owned facilities around the world. It was essentially the same childhood that Rachel had experienced. The same childhood that had turned her into a person capable of destroying her own husband without blinking. Rachel set down the papers. She thought about Emma's laugh, about Noah's curiosity, about the way they looked at the world with wonder and innocence. She thought about what her father's training had done to her, the coldness it had created, the isolation, the inability to trust anyone completely. Did she want that for her children? No. But did she want them to be unprepared, to be victims of their own fortune, manipulated by people who saw only dollar signs? Also no. There had to be a middle path, a way to protect them without destroying them, a way to prepare them without breaking them. Rachel folded the proposal and put it in her purse. She would need time to think, time to consult with advisors she actually trusted. And maybe, just maybe, she would need to have one more conversation with her father. Not as a frightened daughter, not as a rebellious runaway, but as an equal, as a Kingston. The thought terrified her. It also strangely felt right. Rachel stood up and walked out of the hotel, back into the city, back toward her children and whatever future awaited them. She didn't know what she was going to do yet. But she knew one thing for certain. She was done running. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, like a Kingston. Rachel spent 3 days reading her father's proposal. She read it in the morning while the twins ate breakfast. She read it at night after they fell asleep. She read it so many times that she could recite entire paragraphs from memory, and still she couldn't decide. On the 4th day, Margaret Chen called with news. Victoria Palmer's plea deal went through, the attorney said. She's testifying against Marcus in exchange for 2 years probation and community service. No jail time. Rachel set down her coffee. She got off that easy. She gave them everything. Emails, recordings, bank statements. She even wore a wire during one of their last conversations before the arrest. Marcus never stood a chance. What about his sentence? The trial is scheduled for next month, but his new lawyer is pushing for a plea deal. 7 to 12 years most likely. He'll be eligible for parole in 5 years. Emma and Noah would be 8 years old before their father could even apply for release. Has he tried to contact the children? Rachel asked. He's made several requests through his attorney, all denied. Given the nature of the charges and the ongoing custody proceedings, the court has suspended his parental rights pending the outcome of the trial. Rachel should have felt satisfied. This was what she wanted. Marcus out of her life, out of her children's lives, unable to hurt them ever again. Instead, she felt hollow. There's something else, Margaret continued. We received a letter from Marcus, addressed to you. Do you want me to forward it? Rachel hesitated. She thought about the drawer full of unopened letters, the ones she had refused to read because she didn't want to give Marcus the satisfaction of a response. What does it say? I haven't opened it. Attorney-client privilege only extends to his communications with his own counsel. This is personal correspondence. Rachel stared out the window at the city below. Send it over. The letter arrived by courier that afternoon. Rachel waited until the twins were napping before she opened it. Marcus's handwriting had changed. It was messier now, more desperate, the letters cramped together like he was running out of space and time. Rachel, I know you have no reason to read this. I know you have no reason to believe anything I say, but I need to write it anyway, even if it ends up in the trash where it probably belongs. I was wrong. About everything. I spent 5 years treating you like you were less than me, like you were lucky to be with me, like I was doing you some kind of favor by letting you into my world. I was so blind. I was so arrogant. I was so incredibly stupid. You were never the waitress I rescued from a boring life. You were a genius hiding in plain sight. You gave me everything, your intelligence, your loyalty, your love, and I threw it away for a woman who turned on me the second things got hard. Victoria is testifying against me now. Did you know that she's telling them everything? She's making me sound like some kind of criminal mastermind, when the truth is, I was just a fool who got caught up in his own ego. I don't blame her. I don't even blame you. The only person I blame is myself. I'm going to prison, Rachel. For a long time. And the thing that kills me isn't losing the company, or the money, or the penthouse. It's losing Emma and Noah. I was a terrible father. I know that now. I was always too busy, too distracted, too focused on building something that I thought would last forever. I missed birthdays and recitals and first words. I missed everything that actually mattered. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm not asking you to let me see them. You have every right to keep them away from me. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. All of it. The life I could have had. The family I threw away. The woman I was too stupid to appreciate. You were always the smart one, Rachel. I was just too proud to admit it. Rachel read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the drawer with the others. She didn't feel sympathy for Marcus. She didn't feel vindication either. She just felt tired. Tired of the anger. Tired of the resentment. Tired of carrying the weight of a marriage that should never have happened. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. 1 week is almost up. Have you made your decision? H. Her father. Of course. Rachel looked at the text for a long moment. Then she typed her reply. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Your terms. The response came immediately. Excellent. The car will be there at noon. Rachel set down her phone and went to check on the twins. They were still sleeping, curled up together on Noah's bed like two puppies seeking warmth. Emma's thumb was in her mouth. Noah's arm was wrapped protectively around his sister. They looked so innocent, so untouched by the chaos swirling around them. Rachel leaned against the doorframe and watched them breathe. In and out, in and out. The simple rhythm of childhood. Whatever happened tomorrow, whatever deal she made with her father, she would protect that innocence. She would fight for it with everything she had. Even if it meant becoming the thing she had spent 10 years running from. A Kingston. The car arrived at noon exactly, a black Mercedes with tinted windows and a driver who looked more like a bodyguard than a chauffeur. Rachel had arranged for her own security to follow in a separate vehicle. She wasn't stupid enough to meet her father without backup. The twins stayed home with the nanny and 2 additional guards. Rachel had kissed them goodbye and promised to bring back a surprise. She didn't know what the surprise would be yet, but she had learned that bribery was an effective parenting tool. The drive to the Hamptons took 2 hours. Rachel spent most of it staring out the window, watching the city give way to suburbs, and then to the rolling green estates of Long Island's wealthy elite. She had grown up on one of these estates. She had learned to ride horses and play tennis, and speak 4 languages fluently. She had been groomed for greatness from the moment she could walk, and she had hated every second of it. The Kingston estate appeared at the end of a long private road lined with ancient oak trees. It was a sprawling Victorian mansion that looked more like a museum than a home. Gray stone walls, ivy-covered towers, windows that reflected the sky like watchful eyes. Rachel had always thought it looked like a prison. Silas was waiting at the front door. He was older now, his hair gray at the temples, but he still moved with the coiled readiness of a predator. "Miss Rachel," he said, opening her door. "It's been a long time." "Hello, Silas. You look well?" "I've been better. Your father is in the library." Of course he was. Henry Kingston conducted all-important business in the library. It was where he had interviewed potential employees, negotiated billion-dollar deals, and once, according to family legend, threatened to destroy a senator's career over a perceived slight. Rachel walked through the marble foyer past the paintings of ancestors she barely remembered up the grand staircase that she had slid down as a child when the nannies weren't watching. The library doors were mahogany 12 feet tall, carved with images of wolves hunting deer. Rachel had always found them disturbing. Henry said they represented the natural order of things. She pushed them open. Her father sat in his usual chair by the fireplace, a leather wingback that he claimed had belonged to a Vanderbilt. He was reading a financial report, his glasses perched on the end of his nose. He looked smaller than she remembered. Frailer. The cancer was eating him from the inside, even if he refused to show it. "Serafina," he said without looking up. "You're early. I prefer Rachel. And I prefer punctuality." He set down the report and removed his glasses. "But we don't always get what we prefer, do we?" Rachel sat in the chair across from him. She didn't wait for an invitation. Those games were for people who hadn't grown up in this house. "I read your proposal," she said. "I assumed you would, multiple times knowing you. It's thorough. I don't do anything halfway." Rachel reached into her bag and pulled out the document. She placed it on the table between them. "I have conditions." Henry's eyebrow raised slightly. "Conditions. Interesting. Most people simply accept or reject." "I'm not most people." "No," Henry agreed. "You never were." He gestured with one thin hand. "Proceed." Rachel took a deep breath. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the negotiation she had rehearsed in her head 100 times. First, the education plan. "I'll agree to tutors for languages and financial literacy, but no strategic thinking development. I won't have my children taught to see the world as a chessboard." "Strategic thinking is essential for non-negotiable," Rachel cut in. "Emma and Noah will learn empathy, compassion, and kindness. They will volunteer at homeless shelters and visit children's hospitals. They will understand that money is a tool, not a measure of worth." Henry stared at her. "You want to raise soft children in a hard world." "I want to raise good people who can handle hard situations. There's a difference." A long silence stretched between them. Then Henry nodded slowly. "Very well. What else?" "The visits. I'll bring them to see you twice a month. But the visits will be supervised. By me. You don't get to be alone with them ever." "You think I would harm my own grandchildren?" "I think you would try to shape them, mold them, turn them into little versions of yourself." Rachel leaned forward. "I won't let that happen." Henry's jaw tightened. For a moment, Rachel saw the old fire in his eyes, the ruthless determination that had built an empire and destroyed anyone who stood in his way. Then it faded, replaced by something that looked almost like acceptance. "You really have grown up," Henry said quietly. "You're not afraid of me anymore." "I'm terrified of you," Rachel admitted. "But I'm more terrified of what you could do to my children. And fear doesn't control me anymore. I control it." Henry actually smiled. It was small and sad and genuine in a way that Rachel had never seen before. "Your mother used to say something similar. Before she died, she told me that fear was a cage that I had built around myself. She said one day I would regret all the people I had pushed away in the name of protecting what was mine." Rachel didn't know what to say. Her father never talked about her mother. Not once in her entire childhood had he mentioned the woman who had died giving birth to Rachel. "Was she right?" Rachel asked. "Yes," Henry said simply. "She was right about everything. I was too stubborn to see it while she was alive, and too proud to admit it after she was gone." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. He placed it on the table next to the proposal. "This was hers. She wanted you to have it when you got married. I kept it instead." Another regret. Rachel opened the box. Inside was a ring, not a diamond, but an emerald deep green and flawless, set in antique gold. "It belonged to her grandmother," Henry said. 5 generations of Vanderburg women wore it on their wedding day. Your mother wore it when she married me. She wanted you to wear it too." Rachel stared at the ring. She felt something crack inside her chest. Some wall that she had built to keep her father out. "Why are you giving this to me now?" "Because I won't be here for Emma's wedding, or Noah's. I won't be here for graduations, or first jobs, or any of the moments that make life worth living." Henry's voice wavered slightly. I wasted 60 years building things that don't matter. I have 6 months left to do something that does. Rachel closed the box. She didn't put on the ring, but she didn't refuse it either. I have one more condition, she said. Name it. The trust. I want it restructured. Emma and Noah shouldn't inherit everything at 18. That's too young, too much pressure. What do you propose? Graduated access. A small allowance at 18. 10% at 25. Full control at 35, but only if they've demonstrated financial responsibility and completed some kind of meaningful work. Not busy work. Real work. Careers they choose for themselves. Henry nodded slowly. That's sensible. I'll have the lawyers draw up the amendments. And one more thing. You said one more condition. I lied. Rachel allowed herself a small smile. I want veto power over any Kingston business decisions that affect the children's trust until they're of age. If you're going to be grooming them for leadership, I want to make sure the company they inherit is worth leading. Henry laughed. It was a genuine laugh, rough and surprised. You're negotiating for board influence, using your children as leverage. I learned from the best. Yes, Henry said, studying her with something close to pride. You did. He extended his hand across the table. Do we have a deal? Rachel looked at his hand. Thin and spotted with age, but still strong, still capable of crushing anything that got in its way. She reached out and shook it. We have a deal. Henry held her hand for a moment longer than necessary. I know you don't believe me, but I am proud of you, Rachel. What you did to Marcus, the way you handled the court, the way you're handling me now. You're everything I hoped you would become. I'm nothing like you. No. Henry agreed, releasing her hand. You're better. You have your mother's heart along with my brain. That's a dangerous combination. He stood up, steadying himself on the arm of his chair. The effort was visible now, the weakness he had been hiding. Stay for dinner, Henry said. The chef is preparing something special, and there are things I want to show you. Documents, histories, things you should know before I'm gone. Rachel hesitated. Every instinct told her to leave to get back to her children to maintain the distance that had kept her sane for 10 years. But another part of her, a part she had tried to suppress, wanted to stay. Wanted to know the father she had spent her whole life running from. 1 hour, Rachel said. Then I need to get back to the twins. 1 hour, Henry agreed. Follow me. There's something in the vault I want you to see. The vault was in the basement behind a steel door that required a retinal scan, a fingerprint, and a 16-digit code to open. Rachel had been inside only once before when she was 16, and her father wanted to show her the original Kingston family charter from 1847. It was larger than she remembered, more like a museum archive than a family vault. Rows of shelves held leather-bound ledgers, antique maps, jewelry boxes, and sealed document tubes. Henry led her to a wall of framed photographs. Some were black and white, faded with age. Others were more recent, showing buildings and factories and oil rigs. This is our history, Henry said, gesturing at the wall. 4 generations of Kingstons building, acquiring, expanding. Your great-great-grandfather started with a single textile mill in Rotterdam. Your great-grandfather moved the family to America and invested in railroads. Your grandfather pivoted to technology before anyone else saw its potential. And you, Rachel asked. I consolidated. I protected. I made sure that no one could take what we had built. Henry's voice was matter-of-fact. I also made enemies. Many enemies. People who would love to see the Kingston name destroyed. Is that why you're telling me this? To warn me? Partly. Henry moved to a different section of the vault. He pulled out a thick folder and handed it to Rachel. These are the threats, current and ongoing, competitors who want our market share, politicians we've angered, criminal organizations we've refused to cooperate with. Rachel flipped through the folder. The names were familiar, CEOs of major corporations, foreign government officials. Names that appeared in newspapers and on television. Some of these people tried to have me killed, Henry continued. 3 times in the last decade. Silas handled it. He's very good at handling things. You're telling me that my children will inherit a target on their backs. I'm telling you that they already have one, just by being Kingstons. Henry took the folder back and returned it to its shelf. This is why I wanted to prepare them, not to make them cold or ruthless, but to make them aware. The world is not kind to the unprepared. Rachel felt the weight of his words settling over her. She had run away from the Kingston legacy because she hated the politics, the paranoia, the constant sense that everyone wanted something from her. Now her children would face the same thing. And she couldn't protect them by hiding. How do I keep them safe? Rachel asked quietly. Without turning them into prisoners like I was. You teach them, Henry said. You show them the world as it is, not as we wish it were. You give them tools and let them decide how to use them. He paused. And you trust them. Something I never did with you. Rachel looked at her father. Really looked at him. For the first time, she saw past the monster she had built in her memory. She saw an old man who had made terrible choices and was now trying in his clumsy way to make amends. I hated you for so long, Rachel said. I blamed you for everything that went wrong in my life. For my inability to trust people, for my failed marriage, for all of it. You were right to hate me. Maybe, but I'm tired of it now. It takes too much energy. Rachel exhaled slowly. I don't forgive you. I'm not sure I ever will. But I'm willing to move forward, for Emma and Noah's sake. Henry nodded. There were tears in his eyes, though he blinked them away quickly. That's more than I deserve, he said. Thank you. They stood in silence for a moment, surrounded by the accumulated history of the Kingston Empire, past and future bound together by blood and money and choices that could never be undone. Then Henry reached out and touched Rachel's shoulder. It was awkward and uncertain, the gesture of a man who had never learned how to express affection. Come upstairs, he said. There's someone I want you to meet. Rachel frowned. Someone? An old friend. She's been waiting to see you for a very long time. They climbed back up to the main floor and walked through the mansion to a sunny sitting room at the back of the house. Rachel had never spent much time in this room as a child. It was too cheerful, too bright, too unlike the rest of the gloomy estate. An elderly woman sat by the window reading a book. She looked up as they entered. Rachel stopped breathing. The woman had silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun. Her face was lined with age but still beautiful. Her eyes were the exact shade of green as Rachel's own. Hello, my dear, the woman said softly. You look just like your mother. Rachel's voice came out as a whisper. Grandmother. Ingrid Vanderberg smiled. I was wondering when you would come home. Rachel turned to her father, stunned. You told me she was dead. You told me she died when I was 5. I told you many things that weren't true. Henry's voice was heavy with regret. I was angry at her for taking your mother's side, for telling me I was too harsh with you, so I cut her out. I told you she was gone, and I told her the same about you. I spent 15 years believing my granddaughter wanted nothing to do with me, Ingrid said. She rose from her chair and walked toward Rachel, her steps slow but steady. Henry finally told me the truth 3 months ago, when he got his diagnosis. Rachel felt the world tilting beneath her. Everything she had believed about her family, her history, her identity, was shifting like sand. I don't understand. Ingrid took Rachel's hands in hers. They were soft and warm and impossibly real. There is so much to explain, my darling. So much lost time to make up for. But we have time now. Not much, but some. She looked at Henry with something between affection and exasperation. Your father is a stubborn, difficult man, but he's trying to make things right before the end. Rachel looked back and forth between her grandmother and her father. 2 people she had mourned in different ways. One she had hated, one she had forgotten. The twins, Rachel said suddenly. You have great-grandchildren, Emma and Noah. They're 3. Ingrid's eyes filled with tears. I know. Henry showed me pictures. They're beautiful, Rachel. So beautiful. Would you like to meet them? Ingrid squeezed Rachel's hands. I have been waiting my whole life to meet them. Rachel felt something break open inside her. Not painfully, but like a flower blooming after a long winter. She pulled her grandmother into a hug, breathing in the scent of rosewater and old books. I'm sorry, Rachel whispered. I'm so sorry for all the years we lost. Not your fault, my darling. None of it was ever your fault. Over Ingrid's shoulder, Rachel saw her father watching them. His expression was unreadable, but she thought she saw something that might have been peace. He had destroyed so much in his life, relationships, trust, love, but maybe in his final months, he was learning to build something instead. Rachel held her grandmother and cried for everything she had lost and everything she had just found. And somewhere deep inside her, a wound that had been bleeding for 10 years finally began to heal. 3 weeks after Rachel found her grandmother, Marcus Wells went on trial. Rachel didn't want to attend. She had moved on, built a new life, started healing wounds she hadn't known she carried. But Margaret Chen called her on a Tuesday morning with news that changed everything. The defense is calling you as a witness. Rachel nearly dropped her coffee. What? How is that possible? Marcus's new lawyer is trying a desperate strategy. He's arguing that you manipulated him from the beginning, that you entrapped him into a marriage with the sole purpose of stealing his company. That's insane. He didn't have a company when I met him. He had a broken laptop and a dream. I know, but the jury doesn't know that, and Marcus is charming. Even now, even facing prison, he's charming. His lawyer thinks if they can paint you as the villain, they might create reasonable doubt. Rachel sat down heavily on her kitchen chair. Through the doorway, she could see Emma and Noah playing with their grandmother in the living room. Ingrid had moved into the guest suite 2 weeks ago, and the twins already adored her. What do I need to do? You need to testify. Tell the truth. Let the jury see who you really are. And if they don't believe me, Margaret paused, then Marcus might go free, and he might try to get custody of the children again. Rachel felt a cold knot form in her stomach. She had thought this was over. She had thought the worst was behind her. She should have known better. With Marcus, the worst was never behind you. When do I testify? Thursday, 10 a.m., Federal Courthouse in Manhattan. Rachel closed her eyes. I'll be there. She spent the next 2 days preparing. Margaret walked her through potential questions, potential attacks, potential traps. They reviewed documents until Rachel could recite timelines in her sleep. But nothing could prepare her for walking into that courtroom and seeing Marcus again. He looked different, thinner, paler. The orange jumpsuit had been replaced by a gray suit that hung loosely on his frame. His hair was shorter, his beard grown out in a way that made him look older and somehow more sympathetic. He smiled when he saw her. That same charming smile that had won her heart 6 years ago. Rachel didn't smile back. The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery, their notebooks ready. This case had become a media sensation, the story of the billionaire heiress and the con man who tried to steal her empire. Rachel took her seat in the witness stand. She placed her hands on her lap to keep them from shaking. The defense attorney approached. His name was Vincent Riggs, and he had a reputation for destroying witnesses on the stand. He was short, balding, with eyes that reminded Rachel of a snake. Mrs. Kingston, Riggs began deliberately, using her maiden name. Or should I say, Ms. Wells, I'm never quite sure which identity you're using these days. My legal name is Rachel Kingston. I used the name Rachel Chen during my marriage. Ah, yes. The name you used to hide your true identity from your husband. Riggs turned to the jury with a theatrical shrug. Seems we're already starting with deception. Objection. The prosecutor, a woman named Sandra Williams, rose from her seat. Counsel is editorializing. Sustained. Mr. Riggs asked questions. Riggs nodded unfazed. Mrs. Kingston, when did you first meet the defendant? 6 years ago, at a diner in Brooklyn where I worked as a waitress. A waitress, despite being the heir to a fortune estimated at over $30 billion. I left my family when I was 19. I wanted to live a normal life. A normal life. Riggs repeated the words like they were a punchline. And yet when you met Marcus Wells, you didn't tell him who you really were, did you? No. You let him believe you were a simple waitress with no family connections. I didn't lie about my identity. I just didn't volunteer information about my past. That's a very fine distinction, Mrs. Kingston. Riggs picked up a document from his table. Let me read from your own prenuptial agreement. Section 7, paragraph 3. All intellectual property created by either party prior to the marriage shall remain the sole property of the originator. You insisted on this clause, correct? Yes. Because you already knew at the time of your marriage that you had created valuable technology. I had written some code, yes. I didn't know how valuable it would become. But you suspected. That's why you protected it. Riggs stepped closer to the witness stand. Mrs. Kingston, isn't it true that you targeted Marcus Wells specifically because of his ambition? Because you saw an opportunity to use his drive to monetize your technology while keeping all the profits for yourself? No, that's not what happened. Then explain to the jury how a billionaire heiress ended up married to a struggling entrepreneur who just happened to build his entire company on technology you created. Rachel took a breath. She had prepared for this question. She had rehearsed her answer a dozen times. I met Marcus at a diner. He was charming and passionate, and he talked about changing the world. I fell in love with him. I didn't plan it. It just happened. And the technology. The algorithm that powers Wells Digital. Marcus was working on a project. He showed it to me one night, frustrated because he couldn't make it work. I looked at the code and saw the problem. I stayed up late fixing it, improving it, because I wanted to help him succeed. I didn't do it for money. I did it because I loved him. How romantic. Riggs's voice dripped with sarcasm. And yet you made sure to put your initials on the patent. R.C. Rachel Chen. Your hidden identity. Not Rachel Kingston, your real name. Why is that? Marcus suggested it. He said it would be our little secret. A romantic gesture. A romantic gesture that just happened to give you legal ownership of his company's core technology. Riggs shook his head. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is not a love story. This is a calculated scheme by a wealthy woman to exploit a hard-working man. Objection. Sandra Williams stood again. Counsel is making closing arguments during cross-examination. Sustained. Mr. Riggs, I won't warn you again. Riggs smiled unbothered. He knew the jury had heard him. That was all that mattered. Mrs. Kingston, let's talk about the document your husband signed 3 years ago. The one that transferred his rights to the Aurora Trust. You testified that he signed it thinking it was a liability waiver. Yes? Did you explain to him what the document actually was? Rachel hesitated. This was the moment she had dreaded. The truth that she had buried deep inside herself. No. No. You let him sign away his life's work without telling him what he was signing. I tried to tell him. He didn't want to read it. He said he trusted me. He trusted you. Riggs repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. And you used that trust to take everything from him. Rachel felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. She would not cry. She would not give Marcus the satisfaction. I gave him the document after I found out about his affair. Rachel said, her voice steady despite the pain. I knew he was cheating on me. I knew he was planning to leave me. So yes, I protected myself. I protected my children, because I knew that the moment he didn't need me anymore, he would throw us away like garbage. You knew he was having an affair. I had suspected for months. Then I installed cameras in our home. I saw him with Victoria Palmer. In our bed. In our home. Riggs paused. This wasn't the answer he had expected. You installed cameras in your own home without your husband's knowledge. Yes. Isn't that illegal? Sandra Williams stood up. Your Honor, surveillance in one's own home is legal in New York State. Mrs. Kingston broke no laws. Noted, the judge said. Continue, Mr. Riggs. Riggs regrouped. Mrs. Kingston, you've testified that you loved Marcus Wells. You've testified that you wanted to help him succeed. But your actions tell a different story. You hid your identity. You manipulated legal documents. You installed secret cameras. You gathered evidence against your husband for months without confronting him. These are not the actions of a loving wife. These are the actions of a predator. Rachel looked at Marcus. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Hope, fear, satisfaction. She didn't care anymore. Mr. Riggs, Rachel said, turning back to face the attorney. I spent 5 years of my life loving a man who saw me as nothing more than a tool. I cooked his meals. I raised his children. I fixed his code at 2 a.m. while he slept. And in return, he moved his mistress into my home while I was buying groceries. Her voice grew stronger. You want to know why I protected myself because no one else was going to. You want to know why I gathered evidence because I knew that when the time came he would lie, just like he's lying now. She looked at the jury. I'm not a predator. I'm a mother who did what she had to do to protect her children from a man who saw them as inconveniences, and I would do it all again every single time because my children deserve better than a father who would sell their future for a penthouse and a mistress. The courtroom was silent. Riggs opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. For the first time in his career, he had been outmatched by a witness. No further questions, he said finally. Sandra Williams stood for redirect. Mrs. Kingston, one question. Did you ever at any point intend to harm Marcus Wells? No. What was your intention? Rachel paused. She thought about Emma and Noah, about her grandmother waiting at home, about the life she was finally building after years of hiding. My intention was to survive, Rachel said quietly, and to give my children a chance at a normal life. That's all I ever wanted. Sandra nodded. The prosecution rests. Rachel stepped down from the witness stand. As she walked past Marcus, he reached out and grabbed her arm. Rachel. His voice was desperate, pleading. Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. The bailiff moved to intervene, but Rachel held up her hand. Sorry for what, Marcus? For cheating on me, for trying to take my children, for selling our company's technology to foreign competitors. She pulled her arm free. You're not sorry for any of it. You're sorry you got caught. That's not true. I've changed. Prison has changed me. Prison hasn't changed you. It's just shown you who you really are. Rachel stepped back. Goodbye, Marcus. I hope you find peace, but I won't be part of your redemption story. She walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Rachel waited at home with Ingrid and the twins. Margaret called with updates every hour, but there was nothing to report. The jury had requested testimony transcripts. They had asked to review the financial documents. They were taking their time. Is Mommy okay? Emma asked, climbing into Rachel's lap. Rachel kissed her daughter's forehead. Mommy is fine, sweetheart. Just tired. Is the bad man going away? Rachel looked at her daughter. 3 years old, and already she understood more than she should. I don't know, baby. We have to wait and see. Noah came over and squeezed in next to his sister. Great-grandma says the good guys always win. Ingrid smiled from her chair. I said that good usually wins eventually, but sometimes it takes patience. Rachel held her children close. Whatever happened, whatever the verdict, she had this moment, this family, this love that no court could take away. Her phone rang. Margaret. They're back. Rachel's heart stopped. Already? The judge is calling everyone back in 20 minutes. I can have a car there in 10. Rachel looked at her children, at her grandmother, at the life she had built from the ashes of her marriage. I'm on my way. The courtroom was even more crowded than before. Word had spread that the verdict was in. Reporters jostled for position. Photographers aimed their cameras at the door. Rachel slipped in through a side entrance and took a seat near the back. She didn't want to be seen. She just wanted to hear the words. Marcus was brought in by 2 guards. He looked terrified. For the first time since Rachel had known him, he looked genuinely, completely afraid. "All rise," the bailiff called. The Honorable Judge Patricia Coleman presiding. Everyone stood. The judge entered and took her seat. "Be seated. Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson, a middle-aged woman with gray hair, stood up. "We have, Your Honor." "On the charge of wire fraud, how do you find Wu guilty?" Rachel exhaled. Marcus slumped in his chair. "On the charge of embezzlement, how do you find guilty? On the charge of corporate espionage, how do you find—" A long pause. The foreperson looked at her paper, then at Marcus, then at the judge. "Guilty." The courtroom erupted. Reporters started shouting questions. Marcus's lawyer was on his feet demanding a mistrial. Marcus himself sat frozen, staring at nothing. Rachel felt nothing. No triumph, no satisfaction, just a hollow emptiness where her anger used to be. Judge Coleman banged her gavel. "Order, order in the court." She waited for the noise to subside. "Sentencing will be scheduled for 30 days from today. The defendant is remanded to custody pending sentencing. Court is adjourned." The guards moved to take Marcus away. As they led him past Rachel's row, he stopped. "Rachel." She looked up at him. At the man she had loved, the man she had married, the man who had betrayed her in every way possible. "I did love you," Marcus said. His eyes were wet. "In the beginning, before everything went wrong. I want you to know that, May." Rachel considered his words. She searched for anger, for hatred, for the bitter satisfaction of revenge. She found only pity. "I know," she said softly. "That's what makes it so sad." The guards pulled Marcus away. He didn't resist. He just walked, shoulders slumped toward the door that led to handcuffs and prison cells and a future without freedom. Rachel watched him go. Then she stood up, walked out of the courthouse, and went home to her children. The sentencing came 4 weeks later. Rachel didn't attend. She read about it in the newspaper while having breakfast with her family. Marcus Wells received 12 years for wire fraud, 8 years for embezzlement, and 15 years for corporate espionage. The sentences would run concurrently, meaning he would be eligible for parole in 7 years. Victoria Palmer, who had testified against him, received 3 years probation and 500 hours of community service. She was last seen working at a soup kitchen in New Jersey, her designer clothes replaced by a volunteer's apron. "How do you feel?" Ingrid asked, watching Rachel read the article. Rachel set down the newspaper. "Relieved. Sad. Empty. Not victorious. No." Rachel looked at her grandmother. "I thought I would feel triumphant, like I had won some great battle, but I just feel tired and sorry. Sorry for Marcus. Sorry for everyone. For the life we could have had if things had been different. For the father my children will never really know. For all the wasted years." Ingrid reached across the table and took Rachel's hand. "Grief and relief can coexist, my dear. You can mourn what was lost while being grateful for what you found. Is that what you did when my father cut you out of our lives?" Ingrid nodded slowly. "I spent 15 years grieving for a granddaughter I thought had abandoned me. When Henry finally told me the truth, I felt relief and rage in equal measure. It took time to find peace." "How did you find it?" "By focusing on the present instead of the past. By cherishing the moments I have instead of mourning the ones I missed." Ingrid squeezed Rachel's hand. "You have a beautiful life ahead of you, Rachel. Don't let the shadow of what happened darken what's to come." Rachel thought about her father still at the estate, growing weaker by the day. She thought about Marcus beginning a decade-long sentence in a federal prison. She thought about Victoria scrubbing pots in a soup kitchen. And she thought about Emma and Noah playing in the next room, their laughter echoing through the apartment. "You're right," Rachel said. "I have everything I need." That afternoon, Rachel took the twins to visit Henry. It had become a weekly ritual. Every Sunday they drove out to the Hamptons, Emma would show her great-grandfather her drawings. Noah would pepper him with questions about business and history and why the sky was blue. Henry answered every question patiently. He was different with the children than he had been with Rachel, softer, gentler, as if all the hardness had finally melted away. Today, when they arrived, Henry was in his wheelchair. The cancer had progressed faster than expected. He could no longer walk without help. "Great-grandpa." Emma ran to him, wrapping her arms around his thin shoulders. "I learned a new word. Entrepreneurship. Great-grandma taught me." Henry smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "That's a very big word for a very small person. Do you know what it means?" "It means starting your own business," Emma recited. "Like Mommy did." Henry looked at Rachel. Something passed between them. Pride, perhaps, or understanding. "Your mother is a very smart woman," Henry said. "You should listen to everything she teaches you." "I do." Emma climbed into his lap, careful not to jostle the IV line in his arm. "Great-grandpa, are you sick?" Henry glanced at Rachel. She nodded slightly. They had agreed to be honest with the children. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm very sick." "Are you going to get better?" Henry paused. Rachel held her breath. "No," Henry said gently. "I'm not going to get better, but that's okay. I've had a very long life and I've gotten to meet you and your brother. That makes me very happy." Emma processed this information with the seriousness of a child who understood more than adults expected. "Will you go to heaven?" "I hope so." "Will you wait for me there?" Henry's eyes filled with tears. He pulled Emma close and kissed the top of her head. "I will wait for you forever," he whispered. "No matter how long it takes." Rachel turned away, wiping her own eyes. Noah came up beside her and took her hand. "Mommy, why is everyone sad?" Rachel knelt down to his level. "Because we love Great-grandpa, and we're going to miss him very much. I don't want him to go away." "Neither do I, baby. But sometimes people have to go away, and when they do, we remember them. We keep them in our hearts forever." Noah thought about this. "Like Daddy." Rachel's breath caught. "What do you mean? Is Daddy going away forever too?" Rachel didn't know how to answer. Marcus wasn't dead. He was in prison. But for a 3-year-old, maybe the distinction didn't matter. "Daddy made some bad choices," Rachel said carefully. "He has to go away for a while because of those choices. But he still loves you, and you can write him letters if you want." "Will he write back?" "I don't know, sweetheart. We'll have to wait and see." Noah considered this. Then he nodded, satisfied with the answer. "Can I go show Great-grandpa my dinosaur?" "Of course." Noah ran off to find his toy. Rachel stayed where she was, watching her family gathered together in the fading afternoon light. Her father dying, but at peace. Her grandmother restored after 15 years of separation. Her children innocent and resilient and full of love. This was what she had been fighting for. Not money, not revenge, not victory. Just this. Family, connection, belonging. Rachel stood up and walked over to join them. Henry looked up at her as she approached. "You did good, Serafina," he said softly. "Better than I ever did." Rachel sat down beside him. She took his hand, brittle and cold. "I had a good teacher," she said, "even if I didn't realize it at the time." Henry squeezed her hand weakly. "I have one last request." "What is it?" "Take care of them, all of them. Your grandmother, your children, the company, the legacy." He paused, struggling for breath. "I know I wasn't a good father. I know I wasn't a good man. But I tried in the end. I tried to make things right." "You did," Rachel said. "You are." Henry closed his eyes. For a moment, Rachel thought he had fallen asleep. Then he spoke again, his voice barely a whisper. "Your mother would be proud of you." Rachel felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. "Thank you, Father." They sat together as the sun set over the Atlantic, watching the sky turn from gold to orange to deep purple. Emma fell asleep in Henry's lap. Noah played quietly with his dinosaur on the floor. Ingrid came in with tea and blankets, tucking one around Henry's shoulders. For one perfect moment, everything was still. Everything was peaceful. Everything was exactly as it should be. Rachel knew it wouldn't last. Nothing good ever did. But for now, in this moment, she had everything she had ever wanted. A family, a home, a future, and that was enough. And Henry Kingston died on a Tuesday morning in April, 3 months after Rachel had first walked back into his life. Rachel was holding his hand when it happened. The twins were at home with Ingrid, spared from witnessing the final moments. But Rachel had wanted to be there, needed to be there. After everything they had lost, she refused to let him die alone. His last words were simple. "Tell them I loved them, all of them." Then his eyes closed, his breathing slowed, and the monitors flatlined into silence. Rachel sat with him for a long time after the nurses confirmed what she already knew. She held his cold hand and thought about all the years they had wasted, the anger, the resentment, the stubborn pride that had kept them apart. In the end, none of it mattered. He was her father, she was his daughter, and despite everything they had found their way back to each other. "Goodbye, Father," Rachel whispered. "Rest now." She kissed his forehead, stood up, and walked out of the room. The funeral was held 3 days later at the Kingston estate. It was a small ceremony, private, attended only by family and a few trusted employees who had served Henry for decades. Silas stood at the back, his face unreadable, but his eyes wet. He had protected Henry for 40 years. Without a charge to guard, he seemed diminished like a soldier without a war. Rachel gave the eulogy. She spoke about the father she had known as a child, demanding and distant. She spoke about the father she had discovered in his final months, remorseful and reaching for redemption. She spoke about forgiveness and second chances and the courage it took to change. Emma and Noah sat in the front row holding Ingrid's hands. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew Great-Grandpa was gone. Emma had drawn a picture for him, a family standing under a rainbow. Noah had brought his favorite dinosaur to keep Great-Grandpa company in heaven. After the burial, Rachel stood at the edge of the cliff overlooking the Atlantic. The wind whipped her hair back, carrying the salt smell of the sea. She thought about her mother, whom she had never known. About the legacy she was now inheriting. About the children who would one day inherit it from her. Ingrid came to stand beside her. "How are you feeling?" Rachel considered the question. "I don't know. Sad. Relieved. Angry that we didn't have more time. Grateful for the time we had." "That's grief," Ingrid said. "All of those things at once. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't have to. He changed so much in those last months. Sometimes I barely recognized him. People can change when they stop being afraid of death. It frees them to become who they really are." Rachel looked at her grandmother. Who was he really underneath all the power and the paranoia? Ingrid thought for a moment. A frightened boy who never learned how to love. His father was cruel. His mother was absent, and by the time he met your mother, he had built so many walls that she could barely reach him. But she did reach him. Yes, she was the only one who ever did. When she died giving birth to you, something in him broke. He didn't know how to grieve, so he turned his pain into control. He thought if he could control everything, he could never be hurt again. Rachel felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I wish I had known him earlier, before the walls went up." "You know him now. That's what matters." Ingrid put an arm around Rachel's shoulders. "He gave you everything in the end. Not just the money and the company. He gave you his regret, his apology, his blessing. That's more than many children ever get from their parents." They stood together in silence, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. Then Emma came running up the path, her black dress already grass-stained. "Mommy, Noah found a frog." Rachel laughed despite herself. A frog at a funeral. He says great-grandpa sent it from heaven. Is that true? Rachel knelt down and pulled her daughter into a hug. Maybe. Great-grandpa loved nature. I think he would like the idea of sending a frog to say hello. Emma beamed. That's what I told Noah. Can we keep it? We'll see, sweetheart. Let's go find your brother before he puts it in his pocket. Rachel took Emma's hand and walked back toward the estate. Behind her, Ingrid followed slowly, a soft smile on her weathered face. Life continued even in the shadow of death. Perhaps especially then. 6 months after Henry's funeral, Rachel stood in the boardroom of what had once been Wells Digital. The company had been renamed Aurora Technologies. The logo had been redesigned. The entire leadership team had been replaced. But the core mission remained the same: to create technology that improved people's lives. Today was the quarterly board meeting, and Rachel sat at the head of the table. 12 executives watched her with a mixture of respect and wariness. They had seen what happened to the last CEO who underestimated her. The merger with Nexus Communications is proceeding on schedule, Rachel said, flipping through her presentation. Their cloud infrastructure will integrate seamlessly with our AI platform. Projected revenue increase is 18% over the next fiscal year. David, her assistant, appeared at her elbow with a tablet. Ms. Kingston, there's a call for you. It's marked urgent. Rachel glanced at the screen. An unfamiliar number. Take a message. They said it's about Mr. Wells, Marcus Wells. The room went quiet. Rachel felt every eye on her. Excuse me for a moment. She stood and walked to the private office adjacent to the boardroom. She closed the door and answered the call. This is Rachel Kingston. Ms. Kingston, this is Dr. Sarah Palmer at Rikers Island Medical Center. I'm calling about Marcus Wells. Rachel's stomach tightened. What about him? Mr. Wells was transferred to our facility 3 days ago after complaining of chest pains. We ran tests. He has an inoperable brain tumor. The words didn't make sense. Rachel heard them, processed them, but they refused to form a coherent meaning. A brain tumor. Grade 4 glioblastoma, the same type that took Senator Kennedy. It's aggressive and terminal. Dr. Palmer paused. He's been given 6 months to live, possibly less. Rachel sat down heavily in her chair. Marcus, dying, just like her father. Why are you calling me? We're divorced. I have no legal connection to him. Mr. Wells requested to see you. He's lucid for now, but that won't last. The tumor will affect his cognitive function as it grows. He wanted to speak with you while he still can. Rachel closed her eyes. She thought about the trial, about his testimony, about the way he had grabbed her arm and said he was sorry. I'll think about it. Please do. He doesn't have much time. The line went dead. Rachel sat in the silent office for a long time. Then she stood up, smoothed her jacket, and walked back into the boardroom. Where were we? The meeting continued. Rachel led discussions about profit margins and market share and strategic partnerships. She was focused, professional, utterly in control. No one noticed that her hands were shaking. That night, after the twins were in bed, Rachel sat in her study with a glass of wine and tried to decide what to do. Ingrid found her there at midnight. You've been in here for hours. What's wrong? Rachel told her about the phone call, about Marcus, about the tumor. Ingrid listened without interrupting. When Rachel finished, the older woman sat down across from her. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me never wants to see him again. He hurt me so badly, grandmother. He betrayed me in every way a person can be betrayed. And the other part, Rachel stared into her wine glass. The other part remembers that he's the father of my children, that they'll grow up knowing their father died in prison, that I might be the only person who can give them closure. You're not thinking about yourself. You're thinking about Emma and Noah. They're all that matters. Ingrid reached across and took Rachel's hand. You matter too, my darling. Your pain matters. Your healing matters. Don't sacrifice your peace for a man who doesn't deserve it. So you think I shouldn't go? I think you should do whatever allows you to sleep at night. If seeing him will bring you closure, go. If it will only reopen wounds, stay home. Ingrid squeezed her hand. There's no right answer. Only the answer you can live with. Rachel thought about it for 3 more days. Then she drove to Rikers Island. The medical unit was sterile and cold, nothing like the sun-drenched rooms where her father had spent his final months. Marcus lay in a narrow bed, tubes running into his arms, monitors tracking his fading vital signs. He looked nothing like the man she had married. His face was gaunt, his skin yellow, his once thick hair reduced to patches. The arrogance was gone, the charm was gone. All that remained was a dying man waiting for the end. His eyes opened when she entered. It took him a moment to focus. Rachel. His voice was barely a whisper. You came. I almost didn't. I know. I wouldn't have if I were you. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. I look terrible, don't I? Yes. Always honest. That's what I loved about you. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Sit, please. I don't have much time, and there are things I need to say. Rachel sat in the plastic chair beside his bed. She didn't take his hand. She wasn't ready for that. I've been thinking, Marcus said slowly, about my life, about all the choices I made, about where it all went wrong. That's a long list. It is. He closed his eyes briefly. I remember when we first met. You were carrying a tray of coffees, and I thought you were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Not beautiful like Victoria, all polish and perfection. Beautiful like something real, something true. Is that what you wanted to tell me, that I was beautiful? No. I wanted to tell you that I knew. Rachel frowned. Knew what? I knew you were rich, not at first, but about a year after we met, before we got married. The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. What? I hired a private investigator. I was paranoid. I thought you were too good to be true, so I dug into your past. Marcus's eyes were wet. He found the connection to the Kingston family. He found everything. You knew. Rachel's voice was hollow. You knew who I was, and you married me anyway. I married you because I loved you. The money was just a bonus. I thought if I could make you happy, if I could build something impressive enough, you would never leave. You would never find out that I knew. But you cheated on me. You tried to steal from me. Because I got scared. Marcus turned his head to look at her. You were pulling away. After the twins were born, you were always tired, always distant. I thought you were losing interest in me. And Victoria? Victoria made me feel powerful again. Important. Like I used to feel. So it's my fault, because I was exhausted from raising your children. No, God, no. It's my fault. All of it. I was weak and stupid, and I threw away the best thing that ever happened to me because I couldn't handle feeling small. He reached out a trembling hand. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know the truth before I die. Rachel stared at his outstretched hand. She thought about all the times those hands had touched her, held her, hurt her. She thought about her children growing up without a father. She thought about her own father, who had found redemption in his final months. Slowly, reluctantly, she took Marcus's hand. I forgive you. Marcus's eyes widened. You do. Not for your sake, for mine, and for Emma and Noah. Rachel squeezed his hand gently. I've spent too much of my life angry. At you, at my father, at everyone who ever hurt me. I don't want to carry that anymore. The kids. Marcus's voice broke. Will you tell them about me? The real me. Not just the man who went to prison. I'll tell them you loved them. That you made mistakes but you were sorry. That you wanted them to be happy. That's more than I deserve. Probably. But they deserve a father they can remember with something other than shame. Marcus closed his eyes. Tears slid down his hollow cheeks. Thank you, Rachel. For everything. For loving me when I didn't deserve it. For giving me Emma and Noah. For coming here today. Rachel stood up. She looked down at the man she had married, the man who had betrayed her, the man who was now dying alone in a prison hospital. "Goodbye, Marcus. Goodbye, Rachel. Take care of our children." "I will. I always have." She walked out of the medical unit without looking back. Behind her, she heard the sound of monitors beeping steadily, measuring the remaining beats of a broken heart. Marcus Wells died 2 weeks later. Rachel received the call while she was making breakfast for the twins. She thanked the doctor, hung up, and finished scrambling the eggs. Then she sat down with her children and told them their father was gone. Emma cried. Noah didn't understand at first, but when he saw his sister crying, he started crying too. Rachel held them both, rocking them gently, letting them grieve. "Was Daddy a bad man?" Emma asked when her tears finally slowed. Rachel thought carefully before answering. "Daddy made some bad choices. He hurt people, including me and you. But he loved you very much, and in the end he was sorry for the things he did." "Is he in heaven with Great-Grandpa?" "I hope so, sweetheart. I hope they're both at peace." Noah wiped his nose on his sleeve. "Can we draw pictures for them, like we did for Great-Grandpa?" "Of course we can. That's a wonderful idea." They spent the morning drawing pictures. Emma drew a house with a garden and a family standing outside. Noah drew dinosaurs. Some things never changed. Rachel pinned the pictures to the refrigerator right next to the report cards and the finger paintings and all the other evidence of childhood that covered every surface of their home. This was her life now. Not boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. Not legal battles and courtroom drama. Just breakfast and drawings and 2 children who needed her to be present. The money would always be there. The company would run whether she micromanaged it or not. But Emma and Noah would only be young once. Rachel was determined not to miss it. 1 year later, Rachel stood on the stage of the New York Economic Forum preparing to deliver a keynote speech. The audience was filled with business leaders, politicians, journalists, and academics. They had come to hear about the future of technology, about Aurora's groundbreaking work in artificial intelligence and sustainable computing. But Rachel had something else in mind. "When I was 20 years old," she began, "I ran away from everything I knew. I changed my name. I took a job as a waitress. I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment and ate ramen noodles for dinner." The audience shifted, uncertain where this was going. "I did it because I wanted to find out who I was without money, without status, without the burden of a famous name." Rachel paused. "What I discovered was that identity isn't about what you have. It's about what you choose." She looked out at the sea of faces. "I chose to love a man who betrayed me. I chose to fight for my children. I chose to forgive my father and rebuild a relationship that I thought was beyond repair. And I chose to come back to the world I had run away from, not as a Kingston heiress, but as a mother, a leader, and a woman who had earned her place." She clicked to the next slide. A photograph of Emma and Noah appeared on the screen. "These are my children. They will inherit a fortune they didn't ask for, and responsibilities they didn't choose. My job is to prepare them, not by teaching them to see the world as a chessboard, but by teaching them empathy, integrity, and the courage to make their own choices." The audience was silent, captivated. We talk a lot in business about legacy, about building something that lasts. But the most important legacy isn't a company or a fortune. It's the values we pass on to the next generation. Rachel's voice grew stronger. "My father spent his life building an empire. In the end, what he valued most was a few months with his grandchildren. My ex-husband spent years chasing wealth and status. In the end, he died alone with nothing but regret." She leaned into the microphone. "I don't want to be remembered for how much money I made or how many deals I closed. I want to be remembered as a mother who put her children first, as a leader who used her power to lift others up, as a woman who learned from her mistakes and kept moving forward." Rachel straightened her shoulders. "That's my message today. Not a business strategy or a market prediction, just a simple truth. Life is short. Love the people who matter, and never let anyone make you feel like you're not enough." The applause started slowly, then built to a roar. People rose to their feet. Rachel saw tears on some faces, recognition on others. She stepped back from the podium and let the moment wash over her. 2 years ago, she had been a waitress in a faded dress, dismissed and discarded by the man who had promised to love her forever. Now, she was one of the most powerful women in America, leading a company that would change the world, raising children who would carry her values into the future. But none of that mattered as much as what she saw when she returned home that evening. Emma and Noah were waiting at the door. "Mommy." Emma threw her arms around Rachel's waist. "Great-grandma let us stay up late to watch your speech on TV." "You did?" Rachel raised an eyebrow at Ingrid, who was standing behind the children with a guilty smile. It was a special occasion. They needed to see their mother being brilliant. Rachel knelt down and gathered both children into her arms. "What did you think?" "You were so pretty," Emma said. "And you talked about us. Everyone saw us on the big screen." Noah tugged at Rachel's sleeve. "Mommy, you said we're going to choose who we want to be. What do you think I should choose?" Rachel looked at her son, so serious and thoughtful for a 4-year-old. "Whatever makes you happy, sweetheart. Whatever fills your heart with joy." "Can I be a dinosaur scientist?" "Absolutely." "And I want to be an artist," Emma added. "Or a princess. Or both." "Both sounds perfect." Rachel stood up, holding a child in each arm. They were getting heavy, but she didn't care. These moments were precious. These moments were everything. "Come on," she said. "Let's get you two to bed. It's way past your bedtime." "Will you tell us a story?" Emma asked. "What kind of story?" "A story about a princess who saves herself." Rachel smiled. "I think I know just the one." She carried them up the stairs to their room, tucked them into their beds, and sat between them on the soft carpet. "Once upon a time," Rachel began, "there was a princess who lived in a beautiful castle. But the princess wasn't happy. She felt trapped by her crown, imprisoned by her gold. So one day she decided to run away." "Where did she go?" Noah asked, his eyes already growing heavy. "She went to a small village far from the castle. She worked in a bakery and lived in a tiny cottage. She made friends with ordinary people who didn't know she was a princess. And for a while, she was happy." "But then what happened?" Emma whispered. "Then she met a man who seemed kind but wasn't. He hurt her. He tried to take everything she had. But the princess was stronger than he knew. She fought back. She won." "Did she go back to the castle?" "Yes, but this time she wasn't trapped. She was the queen. And she ruled not with fear, but with love. She raised her children to be brave and kind. She helped people who needed help. And she lived happily ever after." "Is that a true story?" Emma asked sleepily. Rachel kissed her daughter's forehead. "The truest story I know." Within minutes, both children were asleep. Rachel sat with them for a while longer, listening to their soft breathing, watching their peaceful faces. She thought about everything she had been through. The betrayal, the trial, the reconciliation with her father, the death of Marcus, the building of a new life from the ashes of the old. It had been the hardest 2 years of her life, and the most transformative. Rachel stood up quietly and walked to the window. The city stretched out before her, millions of lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, people were struggling, fighting, surviving, just like she had, just like she would continue to do. She heard footsteps behind her. Ingrid appeared at her side. "They're asleep." Finally. Ingrid put an arm around Rachel's shoulders. "You did good today. Your mother would have been proud. And my father. Him too, in his own complicated way." Rachel leaned into her grandmother's embrace. "Do you think I'm doing the right thing, raising them in this world with all the pressure and the expectations? I think you're giving them what matters most. Love, security, the freedom to become who they're meant to be." Ingrid squeezed her gently. "The rest will take care of itself." Rachel nodded. She turned back to look at her sleeping children one last time. They were her legacy. Not the company, not the fortune, Not the Kingston name, just two small people who trusted her to guide them through a complicated world. It was the greatest responsibility she had ever known. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Rachel Kingston had spent her whole life running. From her father, from her name, from the weight of expectation that came with being born into wealth and power. But she wasn't running anymore. She was standing still, standing strong, standing exactly where she was meant to be. A mother, a leader, a survivor, a queen who had earned her crown the hard way. And that made all the difference.